Hi folks, in this video we're going to look at the simplest form of finger loop braiding. This is a technique where loops of thread are used to work the braid instead of single strands. Loop braiding is an ancient craft and there are so many beautiful complex examples, but this technique is found in the book Medieval Garments Reconstructed by Else Ostergaard, which looks at the textile finds from Herjolfsnes in Greenland. Disclaimer time, a lot of these finds were from just after the Viking Age. However, I'm still happy to use this kind of braid in my Viking Age clothing work. Because this book is still very relevant to the Viking Age, Inga Hag has drawn comparisons between the clothing styles found in Greenland and things in Hedeby, like the set-in sleeves. And we know that the community established there were of Norse origin. So for me personally, that's a thumbs up. You, however, as always, are going to have to draw your own conclusions and decide if this braid is right for your aims. Finger loop braiding is a little bit more complex than the techniques I've taught you so far. However, we'll do it step by step as always and you'll get the hang of it. Now, I usually use this type of braid for things like waistbands because it's really easy with the technique I'm going to show you to get a nice longer length without having to worry about juggling reams of thread or bobbins and things like that. However, I've got something a little bit different in mind for this braid, so I'll show you that at the end along with a little bit of bonus content, so stay tuned. All you really need for this project is your wool and a pair of scissors. Tape measure can come in handy if you've got a specific length in mind. And also, if you want to do something fancy with the ends, you'll need a needle. Now, if you're just starting out with your Viking Age crafts and you want something to do in the LHE, the Living History Encampment, braiding is a really good one. Because all you're really going to need is your wool and a pair of snips. And if you decide you want to try weaving in the ends actually in camp, you can use one of these brass or iron needles. So the first thing I'm going to do is measure my loops. I'm going to use 3 loops for this cord, and I want each loop to end up being about 3 feet long. So what I'm going to do is measure out for 3 feet. And then I'm going to add some. I'm going to add about 15 inches. So that's half of my loop there at found 50. I'm going to do this 6 times. Why 6, you ask? Well, because we're going to do something rather clever to make a longer cord that's a little bit easier to braid than a full 6 feet length would be. Because that's ambitious, even for me. Now, something to be aware of when you're measuring your wool is that wool's got stretch, so don't pull it tight as you're measuring. Just take it as far as your arms can go and then pinch and move along, because if you're rolling from a ball like this as well, the tension will make it a little bit shorter than you actually think you're cutting. So I've now cut 6 loops ready to braid. You hold your 3 loops on your finger. Keep them nicely pinned there with your thumb while you run all the way down. When you get to the end, tie a simple knot in fairly close to the bottom. You don't want to be right on the bottom, because what can occasionally happen is that the thread will snap. You do that with that loop, and then you're going to tie the next 2 together. put them too tightly because you may want to adjust these slightly once you get set up to your fixed point. And sometimes if they're too uneven, it can make it really tricky. So we have our 3 nice even tops there. These are the tops of the loops that we've just made. Now, normally, if you're making this sort of braid, you'd use the knotted ends at the top because you're just going to tie the whole lot off at the end. And you'd work on these loops because they're a lot easier on the fingers than the knotty ones. But if you want a much longer cord that you can't manage to braid in one go, you can use this technique to make it longer. So what we're going to do is simply run that one through there. And this is the midpoint. We're going to start both of our braids. We're going to make 2 that are absolutely firmly joined together at the top there. Knot it, and then do the same with your other 2 green ones, and we'll be almost ready to go. Okay, so what we've got here is our 3 loops for our 3-strand finger loop braid and another 3 attached. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a knot in just here to stop these from braiding as we're trying to braid these, because otherwise it defeats the object of shortening your lengths. So we're going to tie a little knot there before we go any further. Before you start doing those knots, make sure all your knots are roughly at the end, because you don't want to end up braiding away and finding you've actually started with a knot half the way up and you've got a big knot in your braid. Those ones I'm all happy with. So now I've got to check these ones. And it's a good job I did, because that one has wiggled out of place. So get it in, just hold these firmly in this hand, just slide it round all the way until it's right at the bottom. Lastly, same again with this one, pull it tight straight down to the bottom. Then we're going to tie our knot in here. Now you want to do this bit quite slowly, because you want to try and get that knot to form as close as you can to these without obstructing them. That'll do. Now we need to go and get set up for braiding. So now I'm going to show you how I attach my threads to begin braiding. Now, if you're somewhere in the LHE, for example, and you've got a spike on the top of your tent, on your awning poles, something like that, you could just tie a knot in there. I'll show you here, that's the little knot we tied above for our thread that we're not working at this stage. These are our working threads. So you come up here, you tie a knot, and then you loop that knot over whatever you're working from. Keep that tidy out the way and work on these. However, at home, when there's a high chance I'm going to have to move it all out the way because someone needs the chair, I use this technique. So I lay them next to each other, make a loop, and I pull them through. Pop it through there, pull it all the way through. And then I slide the knot until I've got my knotted piece, my working threads, and I can tuck this one out the way over there where it won't interfere with the work. Now I'm ready to show you how to start making your 3-loop finger loop braid. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the 3-strand finger loop technique that I was taught. You'll see some people do it like this, some people do it like this. I was taught to do it this way, so that's the method that I'm going to show you today. Now, what you do first of all is you have 2 loops on your left hand, first finger, index finger, and you have 1 loop on your middle finger over here. You're going to use your little wiggly index finger to start the braid. So what we're going to do, I know it's quite difficult to see this brown thread against the floor, we're going to go over this side, down and through, and then we're going to go the same again, down into that one, except this time we're going to pull it through the other 2 and pull out to make our braid nice and tight at the top. Now once you've done that, you'll end up in this position. You're going to pop your middle finger in there and just swap that braid to that side. I think it's easiest to learn with 3 loops rather than 5, because 5 involves a lot more fingers moving things around. So if you can master this, 5 will be a lot easier. Coming back the other way, you've now got a spare finger here, so you're going to do exactly the same again. Down through the loop, come up, down through the loop, hook it and bring it through. Pull them both apart to tighten the braid at the top, and you see I've just done that instinctively now. That was on there and I've just gone, nope, thank you, over there. As you do it, you'll get more practiced at this and it will come more naturally. Take it very slow at first and you'll get the hang of it. In a minute, I'll come up to the top and I'll show you how this braid is working up as I do it. Once again, back to our starting position, 2 on the left hand, 1 on the right. We'll take our index finger and we're going to go down, come up again, down, hook that one, pull it through. When we get to here, we now want to free up our index finger, so we're going to pop that one on there, do it again. And you keep repeating this motion, swapping out each time until you've finished your braid. Now in this clip you can see exactly how dynamic a process making this braid actually is. You need to spread your arms to their fullest extension, particularly at the start of the braid, and you may need to take a step towards it as well. This makes it quite entertaining in the LHE as it looks like you're doing a little dance. As we get further down the braid, you can see it becomes a little bit easier to keep that tension nice at the top because you've not got to spread your hands quite so far apart. This means you can work more quickly and get into a really nice rhythm. When you get down to the very end of your braid, you're going to find it becomes a lot more difficult to work. There's a lot of tension here, so just take it nice and slow and keep working until you find it's just not practical anymore. Once you've reached the point where you're happy to stop, just pop a nice loose knot in there and we'll come back later and do both of the fancy end bits together. So we finished our first braid. Now we're going to come back up to the top and we're going to move this knot down to continue with the second half. Once again, try and get it as close as you can to that join point. Leave yourself about 1 centimetre difference. In a moment we're going to remove that little top knot because this is the knot that's going to hold our work while we work on the second half of the braid here. But just before we do that, I want to show you something here. Now you can see that this first part of the braid is a lot looser in its tension than we can get at the end, which is much easier because you haven't got to spread your arms quite as far apart. That's kind of a natural thing with this braid, but it makes it really handy for using for things like waistbands, where this initial portion won't actually be seen. And now we're ready to reattach our work to start the second side. Use exactly the same method as before, whichever one's worked for you. Tuck the first half out of the way so it doesn't get tangled up. and then separate out each of your loops ready to start working again. So here we are, cracking on really nicely now with this second half of the braid. We've passed the initial stage where I need to do the little dance to step in towards it, and we're working on the long length now. Take your arms as far apart as they'll go with each sweep. The more effort you put into this bit, the nicer the braid result will be at the end. And just keep on going. Quite some time later, and you can see here coming down towards the end of the braid now. It's quite a lot easier at this point. You can keep a really nice rhythm going, and it's just before we start to see that tension. In a second, I'm going to switch back views again, and I'm going to show you the technique once more for a quick recap. This is slowed right down now. Through the first loop, hook the second, pull it through, pull apart. Same again. Through the first loop, hook it with your finger, pull apart. And we're almost at the end now. We're back doing these final tight little passes just until it becomes unworkable. Take your time here, slow right down if you need to. And when you're finished, we're going to pop another loose little knot in here just to hold it in place. Lovely. Now we're ready to go and bind the ends. So now we're going to secure these ends. Now you can just knot them, but if you want a neater finish, you can wrap them to keep them secure, just like I've done with this one here. So to do the second one, pinch it fairly close to the end, load up your needle with some nice wrapping threads, and then we're going to come in just above where the braid finishes, about 1 centimetre or so, insert the needle through and tie a little knot. Make sure your short end is about the same length as the tassels you've got left at the end, so you're going to cut them all off together. Then smooth them all out, and you can begin wrapping your thread around. There are a couple of different ways to do this. You're going to just find the way that works best for you. You can twist the braided part and allow the tassels just to move through your fingers as you turn. You may find it easier, as I've done here, to lay the tassels over the back of your hand so that you can then concentrate on wrapping with your thumb and forefinger. If you're struggling a little bit with the tension on this and you fancy having a go at wrapping it while it's still attached to your fixed point, have a look at my video on making the skolderham belt, because that involves an awful lot of wrapping. And it's a little bit easier with that technique because you've got the tension from the fixed point to work with. I'll pop a little link up to that, and it'll be in the description as well if you want to go and have a look at that one too. And you can see there, that's another way that you can hold it. Just play around with these and see which gives you the most control. When you've wrapped to your chosen length, I usually use about 1 centimetre, half an inch. Then you're going to get ready to seal the end up. Pass your needle through your second to last pass, and then tie a little knot in it at the side there. Pull it nice and tight. And then we're going to take our needle, go in through the bottom, come all the way through the wrapped section and pop out at the top. Pull it through nice and gently, don't want it getting tangled up with those dangly bits at the end. Then once again, we're going to pass our needle all the way through the middle of the braid and come out on the other side. And then lastly, we're going to take our needle back down through the wrapping, straight down the middle and out at the end. And that's all going to hold really well, be nice and strong and not come unravelled. To finish off, come down a little way and snip them off. Nice and even. Make sure you haven't got any of the knots from the ends of the loops still on those strings as well. Nice. And you can see here our two finished wrapped ends. And you can also see just how lovely the pattern is that you get from this type of braid. And now for the bonus content. This is something that I'm experimenting with as an addition to my LHE sewing kit. I wanted something that I could use to demonstrate measuring in the field. And since we have no evidence for flexible measuring tapes in the Viking Age, this was my solution. Wrap the cord around the part to be measured, mark it at exactly the top of the wrapping there, keep a firm hold on the mark as you move away from your measured body part, and then sew in a little tag of thread just to mark the point. You could use different coloured threads for different measurements, or try knotting the strings in different ways, different number of knots in each dangly bit for example. This can help you distinguish which measurement is which. So if you wanted, for example, to demonstrate the making of clothes in the LHE, this is one solution that you could use. I want to absolutely stress here that there is no historical evidence for this method whatsoever. But since we don't have any flexible tape measures or measuring devices like this from the Viking Age, this is my experimental solution to that problem. And here is the final braid, measuring in at about 6 foot 8 inches, which is perfect, exactly what I need it for, because that will allow me to measure from the shoulder to the hem of even the tallest person. Now, while we don't have any flexible measuring tapes, one really cool find that we do have is this hazel measuring stick from Winchester excavations. It's dated to the early to the mid 11th century, and the notch markings appear to correspond with Anglo-Saxon ells. These were a standard measurement for cloth at the time. Ells were used for other things later, but in the early medieval period they were a unit for textiles. Obviously this isn't terribly helpful for us when we're trying to measure around a body, and this was most likely used for measuring bolts of cloth rather than a person. However, it does prove that graduated measures, and one specifically for textiles, were in use during the period. How awesome was that measuring stick? Seriously, I need to make one now. Woodworking project! Oh yeah! Thank you all so much for being here. If you've got any questions, pop them down in the comments or come find me on Facebook. I'll be doing another video soon on the 5-loop version of this technique, so look out for that. It's a lot simpler once you've got the hang of this one. Have a wonderful day everybody, happy braiding, and I'll see you soon. Bye!